So that's where we left off last time. We did our year walk, we did our vision quest through the Swedish snowfields, and we were left with a pretty cryptic vision of the future, or probably some sight into what actually happened. The problem was that that's not really the true ending. We were given some pretty cryptic clues there at the end, and we're going to try to figure out the mystery here. So, we're going to go ahead and walk again. So, we find ourselves back in front of the house that we started at. Everything seems to be much the same as it was before, but, well, you might recall the hint that we were given was north of the mill and south of the brook. Now, from our journeys before, those were pretty much the extent as far north as we could go and as far south as we could go, so there's not really additional pathways or anything north or south of here. So it takes a little bit of thinking. You can run through some different ideas. You can think, well, maybe there could be a hint in the encyclopedia, but there's not really. Or there are the hints that I never looked at, but they're more just for the story we've already gone through. So really, all we are left with really to check into is the map itself and this item I never looked at before, the journal. Now, the reason I never looked at the journal is because it requires a username and password that, as such, we have not been given. But we see that on the journal here, it does have the hints that we were given north of the mill and south of the brook. So, with all the other things eliminated as possible means for us to get some type of hint, it's not in the settings and it's not obtained by quitting the game, we can probably assume that what we need to figure out is going to be on the map. So we have the brook here, or I'm sorry, we have the mill here, and it said north of it. So what's north of it? We see some letters that were not here before and can only be seen by highlighting the map. Now, these letters will not appear until you have beaten the game once and you've gotten the clues. So we see here that there are some letters north of the mill and likewise south of the brook. So with these letters and numbers, we now have access to the journal because that's the username and password. So go ahead and type that in. Theodore 68, and what I assume to be the year of 1894. So we can sign in. And we are given options to look at quite a few journal entries. And when I say quite a few, I mean there are a lot. And this is going to be kind of the bulk of this video. But it's interesting, especially considering the fact that if we look up at the name of whose journal this is, it's Theodore's. And that name is familiar because guess who wrote the encyclopedia? It's Theodore Almston, who, if you can go by the login Theodore 68, which would be his name and the year he was born. This is definitely Theo's journal. So for the sake of this, I'm only going to be trying to focus on the entries that are most important, but I'm still going to be going through all of them, so you can pause whenever you feel up to it, whenever you want to. So, right from the start, he's just getting used to the journal system. In fact, it can store photos, which is good. I'm assuming this might be his home in Stockholm, or where he's living currently. But yeah, the purpose of this journal is to chronicle his studies into Swedish folklore, and namely studying into the year walk, which was, not specifically for this game, but just a general study. He goes here into talking about one of his colleagues. He just names ES. But yeah, he finds that learning about the year walk is a pretty difficult experience, if only for the fact that most people that would have any interaction with the year walk are either very old and senile or very dead. It's just not a very common practice anymore, which is understandable. Trying to look into the future via ghosts and spirits and demons doesn't really make a lot of sense anymore. But it seems that that Theodore may have gotten a lead on someone that may have possibly done a year walk at some point in the past. Namely, that person is in the city of Vedtorp, which I'm probably mispronouncing, who went by the name of Daniel Svensson, who died in 1895. So, this leads Theodore into looking into Daniel Svensson more. Seems like the best way to go about learning about a person that could have done a year walk. Maybe it's very unlikely, being that Daniel is dead, that he can interview him, but there could be more information in the city of Vedtorp that might be able to shed some light on just what happened to Daniel or what caused his death. So, Theodore is able to uncover some information, namely in a newspaper article that shows that Daniel had murdered a young woman in Vedtorp. Her name was Stena Nilsson, and she was a miller's daughter. Body was found outside the village, and she had multiple stab wounds, which apparently were done by Daniel, we can assume. Now, this seems very similar to what we saw in our progression through the game. We see here that the motive behind the murder was possibly jealousy, because Stena was going to marry a man named Lucas, and Daniel intercepted her and murdered her. So after a while, the press kind of lost interest, because just another murder, not too much to it. But let's see. It might be our friend ES, our colleague ES, thinks it might be a good idea for us to journey to Vedtorp and maybe look around, see if we can't get any more information, especially in regards to there seems to be a peculiar rune stone in the area as well. So Theodore decides that he is going to look. He's going to actually go to Vedtorp, look around up there, not just look through old dusty archives, see if he can't find some more information. So he gets to Vedtorp, and he is immediately struck by it's a very bleak and desolate and empty place, which could add to the atmosphere, could also signify something just off with the general area. Most interesting, though, is that he does indeed find that in the year 1893, Daniel Svensson did indeed go on a year walk, and it even mentions it in the court documents for Daniel that he went on a year walk. He mentions doing it, and apparently the court seems to think that it might have added to Daniel's madness. The court stenographer refers to a lot of what Daniel says as just ramblings of a madman. But something interesting comes up on the 30th, as Theodore is going through the Vedtorp countryside, attempting probably to find some familiar locations, namely, I think Daniel's cabin in the woods. He also happens across this weird wooden box, which seems very familiar to one we might have seen in our travels in the game. But he decides to take that box with him, and he also finally happens upon Daniel's home, which was rented out a couple times over the century to a number of people as just as a holiday retreat, though it seems very secluded and very remote. He says there are no signs, no roads, just a narrow path. Just an empty forest wasteland. And it really seems to get to Theodore. He also happens across the local church in Vedtorp, which has a epitaph, or he finds Stena's grave that has the epitaph about when she died, and the line, "Her cries for mercy could not sway his hand," which we assume to be Daniel's, but oddly enough, Theodore is unable to find Daniel's grave, whether it be not allowed on sanctified ground or just in an unmarked grave. Theodore is unable to find Daniel's grave at all. No one knows why. So Theodore ends up looking more and more into the local history of Vedtorp, some of the other things that happen there. Namely, something of interest he finds is about a Lisa Rasmussen, who drowned 4 infants in a creek. She was an angel maker. You may recall that was something we learned regarding the myling, and especially regarding the number 4. We had to collect 4 infant spirits for the brook horse. And it seems that she was finally caught for her crime, but yet again, just parallels or maybe references that the game had with whatever Theodore was learning about here. But as such, Theodore has been unable as of yet to find this runestone that his friend ES was talking about, but he was able to find someone that could draw him a map. Very crude map, obviously, but one that successfully led him to this runestone, which I think was supposed to be the large runestone that we found in the game and we drew our own pattern into. But Theodore finally decides to head home, and he brings that small wooden box with him that he found while he was looking for Daniel's home. The problem is that the box cannot be opened. It seems to require some password. And as of yet, we and Theodore have no idea what that password might be. So things continue on forward. Theodore is going to his classes, his meetings, doing very normal things, but he's been having very odd dreams since he left Vedtorp, which he kind of does little illustrations for. And the dreams continue to get more and more bizarre. He starts to see like a female friend from his past. And it seems a very common, normal scene. A very normal dream initially, but as it's about to end, his friend Jenny just turns into dust and dies. And he feels the need to illustrate this and mark it down in his journal for some bizarre reason, but I'm not sure if these dots are supposed to be constellations or stars in the sky, but it's very interesting that amongst all these other shapes and drawings, he decided to draw a triangle, of all things. But as we continue forward, he does decide to read up a little bit more in regards to Daniel's case. And he tries to put forth some of the things he's learned about year walking to his peers, but mostly they just laugh at him. The idea seemed very ludicrous, like this was just one random guy that decided to blame his murders, his madness on this year walking. It's madness. The thing is that Theodore is continuing to have more and more strange dreams that he continues to chronicle and draw. I assume this might be the brook horse that we saw before. And some of the, like I said, some of the journal entries are just reminders for things that Theodore needs to do. Or reminders that he has been, as yet, unable to open the box. Also, we see that he starts to have almost paranoia. He has a very odd tonal shift in his being the further we get along. Because he seems to get very, like I said, paranoid, very threatened by just the way other people see him. And he still just cannot get over the mystery of this box. It hounds him. So yeah, it seems that his friend ES thinks that the visions are just brought on by hallucinations. That's all they are. If you do enough peyote, yes, you will start to see whatever your mind wants you to see. Nothing more, nothing less. It's not the future. Another strange dream. This one, though, mentioning the grim, the church grim, that final goat-like visage that we saw at the end. We see here Daniel trying to get some understanding about the runes he saw, probably on the large rune stone, and his gradual mental degradation over time. Nothing too amazing, but on the 30th, he does receive a very bizarre email amongst all his other emails. It's this. It almost seems like a shape, doesn't it? Like a half circle. And it seems that he got these half circle shapes continually until his email was just full. It would not stop. He thought maybe it was one of his colleagues, one of the students, just playing a prank on him, but it doesn't really make sense. He wonders if it's a threat. So he decides maybe he should talk a little bit more to the priest in Vedtorp, and the priest just says it's normal. Some people just have a weird after effect when visiting Vedtorp. Seems that it is a little bit more than just an after effect, though, because Theodore starts to really hear things outside of sleep. He says he wakes up hearing a baby crying underneath his floorboards, and the screaming wouldn't stop till he pried open the floor. We also see here where he tries to make a maybe like a flow chart, maybe breaking down possibly some progression with maybe a hierarchy. It's kind of hard to say. But yeah, we are getting closer and closer to the end of the year, and Theodore is definitely going into some weird logics regarding the year walk. Maybe there are very specific rules that have to be followed. Maybe what he broke down in the description for his encyclopedia for year walk is something he feels are the very exact necessary rules. Like, one of those was not interacting with people. And the problem was that right from the start of the day, he went and interacted with his female friend, his girlfriend, his secret girlfriend. And maybe that caused something to go wrong with the Earwalk. The problem is, even his friend, his colleague, ES, starts to think that maybe he is taking this study a little bit too seriously. ES is like, it's fine to study into mythology, but don't believe that, Zeus is there. Just study into it. Look at it from a sociological standpoint, not a realistic standpoint. The problem is that Theodore is not so quick to let go of it, and things continue to become more and more odd as Theodore doesn't remember drawing this square in his notebook. It just appeared there. Or maybe he did draw it and just doesn't remember it. It's kind of hard to say, because at this point it seems like Theodore is losing his mind. He starts to draw just very odd things. He starts to really seem to start to connect with whatever Daniel had to go through. And finally, he really starts to isolate himself. He really just starts to focus in on trying to logic out, trying to reason out just exactly what happened to Daniel and just what happened with his year walk. The problem is that this isn't healthy. And finally, we see here that, he just feels incredibly alienated. He's cutting himself off from the entire world. And I guess in retrospect, he wishes he didn't. Because left to his own devices, things just start to spiral out more and more. Like, even pictures and paintings in his house start to take on very peculiar shapes that maybe weren't there before. He says that just one entire painting in his house has been replaced with this triangle-headed person. And he has no idea why. Just someone possibly is breaking into his house, and he's decided to just board up all the windows. Nothing can come in, he hopes. The problem is something does come in. Something gets through the boards and leaves behind a knife. It's an old knife, but still very sharp. And he realizes who the knife belongs to. It's Daniel's knife. It's the knife he used more than likely for the murdering of Stena. And we finally see here just more and more of the mental breakdown, more and more of the helplessness that I guess Theodore feels with regards to the knowledge that he is slowly gaining in regards to the year walk. And basically, we can kind of see where this is coming together. He is very close. Theodore is very close to just fully deciding what needs to be done is to get that connection together with Daniel and for Theodore to go on a year walk himself. And he is very close to figuring out the box. He says that there are 5 watchers and that there are 5 symbols, which means that there is one more symbol yet to come. Yeah, as we've been going through the journal itself, we have been seeing different shapes. We've been seeing triangles, half circles, squares, and those are all messages being sent by these watchers to open this box. We just need one more. And quite quickly enough, over the course of a number of days, we finally do get the final symbol that we need. After a number of incoherent days. Now, a lot of bizarre dreams involving Stena's dead body, but there we go. Finally got the final symbol, which is another half circle, but this one is tattooed on Theodore's hand. He doesn't know where it came from. It just suddenly appeared. But yeah, that's the final symbol for the box. And he finally opens the box. The problem is that the inside of it is empty. There's nothing in it. So, what was the point? What was the point of the box? I mean, was something supposed to be in it and it was lost? Or maybe we have to put something inside of it? It's hard to say, but it seems specifically that Theodore was being given these icons, these symbols, to open the box. And maybe in some way it's hopefully maybe to rectify whatever was wrong with Daniel's year walk. So with that in mind, Theodore decides to head back to Vettorp. He figures out the best day that he should year walk, which is New Year's Eve. And he decides, probably against all better logic, to indulge in a year walk himself. So we see the last couple of days, some very familiar images from the game. And finally, we find ourselves back at Daniel's house, out in the wilderness of Vettorp. And it's time. It's time for, well, it's time for the ending. So let's see how that goes. So, with that all that backstory out of the way, we don't even need to head to the miller's house this time, or the windmill. You may have noticed a couple times we passed by this box. And there was a reason I never interacted with this box, because we have no combination for it. We could just spin it around. It does nothing really. But we now have the combination from reading the journal. The first being the triangle that he wrote down from his dream. The next being the half circle from the email. The third being the square that he didn't remember drawing. The fourth being the triangle-headed painting that showed up in his house. And finally, the half circle that became etched into his hand. And we finally gain access to the box. Inside the box, we find, I guess, a message from the future. A message from Theodore to Daniel. This one outlining the fact that Daniel is set to be executed. He has been found guilty of the murder of Stena. Even though he is mentally unfit to be executed, they still decide to go along with it. And interestingly enough, it does go into the fact that the executioner had four scheduled executions, but one of them kind of fell through for the angel maker, the Lisa Rasmussen. She ended up taking her own life before she could be executed. And this brings up a very interesting point, as Daniel is being or he's being told that he is going to be executed. He does state the last words, "I should have killed myself, then none of this would have happened." It means that Stena would still be fine. No one that he loved would be dead. And under the newspaper clipping, we find a letter, a note from Theo, who says that he is writing from the future, that they have a connection beyond life, death, space, and time, more than likely possibly due to the year walk, maybe due to something closer. And he states the fact that the Watchers need a sacrifice, that for opening through this rift, that there has to be some sacrifice made, and that's probably why Stena had to die. But there is another way. there is a way that we can save her. And we know what we have to do.